I've never been an Ezra Klein fan, and I guess I missed the Ezra Klein boat. I don't know what happened. I guess I don't look to the New York Times for their op-ed section. Been burned one too many times. Um, I'm gonna pass on all the Thomas Friedman crap, like I'm just not that lib who's gonna love the op-ed section. But people do somehow listen to Ezra Klein, and Ezra Klein, of course, has been on a months-long campaign to move the Democratic Party. And guys, this is different. This is different. Move it to the center. Ah, ah, like run candidates that are, in his words, pro-life, which just means you're against the freedom to choose. All right? That's all that means. You believe the state should decide when and how and if you have a child. That's Ezra Klein, and he has been, since the 2024 loss, just sort of like, where did we go wrong? And doing the same thing that centrist pundits have done for time immemorial, but specifically since Hillary Clinton lost, which is maybe we should move to the center. Including Nancy Pelosi said the exact same thing. Hillary Clinton played into being a woman too much. No, Hillary Clinton was unlikable and also did nothing to actually speak to the real needs of people. She was both awful to listen to and her policies stunk. I'm sorry. And of course, sexism, but it's all wrapped up. The point is, Ezra Klein had, of course, the op-ed after the murder of Charlie Kirk, and it said Charlie Kirk was practicing politics the right way. And in it, he makes the case for the idea that Charlie Kirk was open-minded in terms of allowing debate to happen, that he went to college campuses, and that this is how it should be done. And kind of like, it's kind of like he lived out loud. You know what I'm saying? He had a zest for life. He had a zest for, well, xenophobia, but zest for life. We should all have a zest for life. And Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote in response not only to Ezra Klein, but to a couple of other opinion writers in mainstream news sources that they were effectively whitewashing his legacy. And his piece for Vanity Fair was titled "Charlie Kirk Redeemed, A Political Class Finds Its Lost Cause." And let me just say that as someone whose parents read the Times, you all know people who read the New York Times, my mom learned about the song Despacito from the New York Times. This is the level of like people who don't really participate in the culture or listen to music or like are, following who Charlie Kirk is or watching a bunch of YouTube videos, but they're going to read the New York Times and be like, oh, okay, that's who this person was, And so when they open the paper to read Ezra Klein completely ignoring Charlie Kirk's legacy and what he talked about time and again, that has a huge impact, right? That does a massive disservice, I think, to reality, but especially to this idea that we are somehow working with honest brokers in politics, that the other side doesn't actually just want us dead, locked up, or without our fundamental rights. Like that is lying. That's lying. And so one of the lines that Coates had was in 2022 when Kirk was frustrated. Coates is basically taking inventory of what Kirk did and said. In 2022, when Kirk was frustrated, for instance, by the presence of Leah Thomas on the University of Pennsylvania women's swim team, Kirk did not call for spirited discourse. Instead, while discussing a recent championship tournament, he said he would like to have seen a group of fathers descend from the stands, form a line in front of Leah Thomas and say, "Hey, tough guy, you want to get in the pool? Because you're going to have to come through us." By the way, Leah Thomas, trans swimmer. Mere weeks before his death, Kirk reveled in Trump's deployment of federal troops to D.C. Shock and awe force, he wrote, "We're taking our country back from these cockroaches." And in 2023, Kirk told his audience that then President Joe Biden was a corrupt tyrant who should be put in prison and or given the death penalty for his crimes against America. That is being honest. And so Ezra Klein hit up Ta-Nehisi Coates, and they had an interesting discussion. So I'm going to take you through a couple of clips and why I found this discussion so obnoxious, and how much Coates has to like I just the kinds of conversations Ta-Nehisi Coates puts himself into is like, my God, he has so much grace for people who clearly are not listening to him. So here's what he says, sort of in an opener in terms of his problems with Ezra Klein's op-ed.
Went past my initial impressions and started like going through all of the clips of the things he said, the way he talked about people, the way he, described groups in ways that honestly, even as I was writing it, I was uncomfortable saying. And so the idea that this guy should be in any way celebrated for how he conducted politics, the fact that he just slurred across the board, all sorts of groups of people, and then ran an organization wherein, which appeared to me just a haven of hatred.
Pausing it to say, yes, it was a haven of hatred. One of the people who worked there texted another person at Turning Point and said, I hate Blacks. I just hate them, all of them. So, I mean, that's obviously a little coded, but that's the kind of level of hatred that he's talking about.
I would not want that to be a model for my politics. And I know, as we talked between us that, you are not attempting to make a statement for the entirety of it. But I guess I feel like at a certain point, somebody's legacy, or somebody does something that is so large, that it's tough to think about their legacy and take that out of it. And that's how I felt about him.
So I think I want to get at the right level of disagreement here.
Okay. If that is a jump cut from him not like doing active listening, bad on me. But it seems like his reaction to Coates coming very honestly and sincerely at what his problems with Ezra Klein was like, it's an abdication of your duty to, not be honest about when you're writing something like that in this op-ed. And he was like, I want to be clear about the disagreements here. It's like, buddy, would it cost you anything to just stop and say, I hear you? Just that word. Like, I'm like, this is what they teach. If you've ever been to therapy, and who knows, if you've ever been to therapy, it's like active listening. Just say you heard someone say the thing they said. Have a moment as someone is being a little bit like sincere with you to just register that. It's reminding me of the Adam Friedland, oh God, I'm forgetting his name. The Adam Friedland interview with APAC homie. Who's APAC guy? Anyway, I'll think of it. It's on the tip of my tongue. Let's just keep playing it. Richie Torres. Okay, let's go back. Richie Torres.
I don't know. For me, the immediate hours after somebody is murdered in public, when you see that sort of grief and horror pouring out of the people who loved him, and many people loved him, my instinct then is to just sit with them in their grief, right? To say, I can, for this moment, find some way to grieve with you, to see your friend the way, or in some version of the way you saw him, right? That's not my view of, the person's whole legacy, but going to people when they're grieving like that and saying, listen, I want to tell you really what I thought of your friend. Just feels like not what you do in a kind of a community.
I think...
Hang on. What he just said was, it feels like it's not what you do in a community. And it's like, community of what? What are you talking about? Like, do you feel like Kirk is like your coworker? Like are you in a community with Charlie Kirk? And maybe, and I think the reality is Ezra Klein does think of himself in the community with Charlie Kirk. And like, he shouldn't, it's not the thing to do to point out, the reality. You should only say the good things. And so Coates comes back with a very important question.
Just feels like not what you do in a kind of a community.
I think all of that is understandable, but I guess, was silence not an option? Ways that honestly groups in...
Was silence not an option is so good, because I have to tell you this, people, Ezra Klein came out with this within 24 hours of Charlie Kirk being murdered, and he didn't have to say anything. He didn't need to necessarily log a column that day. I'm sure he was going to get paid the same. He could just not say it. Or he could just have a regular violence has no place in, American society, political violence, the same thing that everybody else says. But instead, it's Charlie Kirk was practicing politics the right way. It wasn't just that it's not that he stayed silent, and it's not that he just said something to honor the fact of how horrible and horrific his death was. He actually gave Charlie Kirk flowers, right? And this is true. If you're in the public eye, I mean, I've done very little about Charlie Kirk, right? And I don't think that's actually right. I think we should be honestly talking about his legacy. But there's no reason you need to come out and say anything in the first 24 or 48 or whatever. Silence is an option. You can always just shut the F up. Everyone is free to do it. And I say that as someone who talks a lot for a living. But there's a little bit more, and I want to get into it because at some point, these people are talking past one another. And who these people are to me is a Black intellectual who comes at his experience of the United States and the world through a lens of historic oppression, through a country that has failed him and many people, many of us, someone who very much is from a community that is impacted when things like Donald Trump is elected. And then you have a neoliberal pundit who is a centrist, who is divorced from reality, and who keeps on scratching his head as to why Kamala Harris lost. And it must be because we need to move to the center and actually start having uncomfortable conversations. And where have we heard that before? You got your Joe Scarboroughs, you got your Cenk Uygurs, you got all these, you got your Pelosi's. It's the centrist line. Meanwhile, they're like, we need to keep on meeting in the middle. And they're so far gone, and they don't realize they're all the way on the right-hand side of the table, trying to break bread with people who hate them. And so that's just the setup. And so here's Coates, and he eventually is just like, this is who Charlie Kirk was.
I don't take any joy in saying this, but we sometimes soothe ourselves by pointing out that love, acceptance, warmth, that these are powerful forces. I believe they are. I also believe hate is a powerful force. I believe it's a powerful, powerful unifying force. And I think Charlie Kirk was a hate monger. I really need to say this over and over again. I have a politic that rejects violence, that rejects political violence. I take no joy in the killing of anyone, no matter what they said. But if you ask me what the truth of his life was, and the truth of his public life, I would have to tell you it's hate. I'd have to tell you it is the usage of hate and the harnessing of hate towards political ends.
And if you thought that Ezra Klein came back at that and was like, I hear you, I know. And the question is, how has it been allowed to fester, and who is propping up these narratives, and what are the forces behind them, and the money and the and he does not do any of that. Instead, almost directly after the critique, Ezra Klein insists on talking to Coates all about Democratic strategy, and I took particular umbrage with how he pivots like this.
And we probably don't have very different views on the value of the things he said. Why do you think he was winning?
Why do you think he was winning, right? And that's what Ezra Klein comes. Why do you think he was winning? And I don't know if it's to his credit or not, but Coates takes that question at face value, meaning he agrees that he's winning, right? And he comes at it from basically like, again, hatred is incredibly powerful. And I've seen hate mongers rise to the top for a long time now. But the premise of why is Charlie Kirk winning, like, even just framing Charlie Kirk winning makes me want to puke. And I'm not trying to deny that he had a massive following, but this like winning is also a like attempt to give Charlie Kirk flowers for doing what? For like debating 17-year-olds on their college campuses, right? And getting owned, but just not putting out the clips where he gets owned. You know, why was he winning? And it's just like so crass and so cruel to even frame it like that. And the answer that Coates doesn't even offer, but that I will, is I don't know. When you get propped up by billions of dollars of Koch brothers money, when all of the billionaires except for one is an unmitigated psychopath that is somehow afraid that the hordes of masses are going to come, tax them out of existence, which we should, but also we're going to make them say pronouns. Like, because that's why he's so famous. That's why he was winning. He was an astroturfed little boy who grew up to be an astroturfed man who's helped, because fascism has easy narratives, because racism is a really easy narrative. You don't got to do a lot of convincing. You don't got to, lay out your arguments. It's pretty cut and dry when you just blame other people. The fact that liberals, and Ezra Klein represents this liberal, is unable to see the humanity of the very people that Charlie Kirk targeted, Black Americans, trans Americans, women, right? People in power. Like, even like that is so gross to me, even as an intellectual exercise. You fancy yourself an intellectual, but you actually don't. Like, Ezra Klein. And you know what? I watched this whole interview. And let me just say, not only is Ezra Klein one of the most pompous people who looks like he's smelling his own farts at every single moment before he was waiting for his time to speak, he's deeply insecure. Ezra Klein is a deeply insecure person. And that you feel that insecurity from liberals. And why are they insecure? Because they don't believe in anything. And here he is sitting across the table from someone who believes in something. And that makes liberals so uncomfortable. Truly, it's why Kamala can't endorse, Zoran with more than he's a Democratic nominee. It's why Hakeem Jeffries and Schumer can't even endorse Zoran anyway. It's why they smeared Bernie Sanders. It's because they are staring face to face with someone who believes in something, and it makes them really insecure because they don't know what they believe in, because they don't believe in a lot. So I thought that was an excellent and terrifying and disgusting conversation in so many different ways. And I would ask us to not over-intellectualize this both sides BS. It's why we are who we are. It's because we don't over-intellectualize things when people's lives are on the line. That's not, like, most people don't intellectualize reality. What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/bitchuation room. Do it.